Great to be here, and thanks for the introduction. I feel like there's a South African thread here because having spent the first 15 years of my career in London, second 15 in New York, I was actually born in South Africa. So I do have a connection with you, Ryan and Errol. So I'd like to continue that story. You sort of gave my long job title, but fundamentally what I do with EY is help CFOs and finance leaders figure out how they transform their finance organizations. And so in a number of ways, putting together the full spectrum of services we do across EY to help solve those big challenges. And I think Nicola and Elle did such a great job of comprehensively going through so much. Maybe what I can add is just a little bit of perspective in terms of how clients, and particularly senior finance executives, are thinking about some of these challenges. And alongside the podcast, where I get to speak to a lot of CFOs, a lot of our alliance and technology partners and academics and thought leaders on where finance is going, I also have been, for the last 15 years, leading our DNA of the CFO program. So seeing how the role of the CFO has evolved. And again, I think evolution is the right word for it. I think a lot of people say, this is, massive change. It's like, well, no, actually, the fundamentals have very much remained the same. And, Errol, I love your reference to Tom Peters. And we had Tom Peters speak at an event. I think you look back over the 50 years of Tom's career, the message has been very consistent in terms of what matters, in terms of delivering excellence. And actually, that has happened through various technology cycles, but the core principles are the same. And so as I kind of look at that research, and I can also reference some research we did more recently on the DNA of the corporate controller, how that's evolving, and a piece that we're launching next week actually on DNA of the treasurer. But I think that the big trend is the shift towards value creation, right? And how, as finance people, do we move away from the traditional roles of protecting and optimizing for value into helping organizations create value? And that really, I think, has been a common thread for what executives have been trying to address for a long time. And we've talked about contribution to strategy, we've talked about business partnering, all these kind of things. And, coming back to the podcast, I spoke to Professor Noah Barsky from Villanova, and he talks about it very compellingly in the way that he has a lot of CFOs and senior finance leaders come through his graduate business program. And he asks them the question, where do you want to be focused? What's most important? And they'll trot off, it's about value creation, it's about business partnering. When he then asks them to talk about what are the things that they're working on, what are the things they're measuring, it's very much anchored in that value protection and value optimization. So there's this say-do gap between what as finance leaders we say is important and what we evidence. So I think one of the most exciting things about AI is how does it actually give us the opportunity to bridge that gap and really start to deliver on the value creation agenda. I think one of the big challenges, and I'm sure we'll get into this in terms of the ROI, is making the case for the investment in ROI. And I suspect many of you and many of the panelists will see the big challenge is continuing to manage the cost of finance, right? That is not going to go away, right? We need to be able to demonstrate fiscal responsibility and lead by example for our organizations. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be making the case and articulating the case for why we need investment in AI and finance. And I think you look where a lot of the investment is going right now in organizations. Unsurprisingly, it is going into front office, customer-facing activities, customer acquisition, R&D, because that's what's driving the top line, and that's where, again, fundamentally value gets created. But that doesn't mean that if you free up capacity in finance, you can't be supporting that value creation agenda. So again, be able to demonstrate why actually, automating some of these routine processes, taking time and cost out of the finance function isn't just a cost reduction exercise. It's about how do you redeploy that capacity and that capability that you have in your finance function. So I think it's a really important point here around the communication, the narrative, and nobody is better positioned than finance, frankly, to be making that case, making that story. And again, I think you look at what are the sort of the characteristics of successful finance leaders, successful finance organizations. It's the ones that do get the human aspects right. It's the ones that are effective in communicating. And one of the key data points I use a lot in the presentations is really compelling data point from some research we did with Oxford University, where 75% of CFOs that we surveyed have experienced some form of finance transformation failure in the last 5 years.